More than 2/3 of the surface of the Earth is covered by sea. Within these restless waters there lives so great a diversity of plants and animals that it's possible to consider marine organisms as the most broadly representative life forms on Earth. The richness of marine life is most easily seen at the edge of the sea, for here, where the waves break, is the competitive world of the crabs, barnacles, anemones, sponges, snails, and a host of others on, in, and under the rocks, buried in the sand and mud, hidden in the weed, and occupying every available space. Over millions of years, the inhabitants of this littoral zone have each evolved their own methods of combating such extremes of exposure as violent wave action, freshwater flooding by rain, drying out in the summer sun, and freezing in the winter. As economic interest grows in the sea as a potential source of food and minerals, the need for research and instruction in the sciences of marine biology and oceanography increases. The varied coastline of North Wales is particularly suitable for this kind of work. The island of Anglesey is separated from Carnarvonshire by a unique rocky channel, the Menai Strait. The tidal rhythm of the Irish Sea causes an alternate raising and lowering of the sea level at each end of the strait. The resulting vigorous two-way exchange of water between the strait and the sea allows a very rich and varied fauna to thrive in this narrow passage. The waters are spanned by Telford's famous suspension bridge. It is in the town of Menai Bridge itself, on the Anglesey shore, that the University Marine Science Laboratories are situated. Following the recent building of new teaching laboratories, an Easter course in marine botany has been started. Under the guidance of expert algologists and using very modern equipment, the students are given every opportunity to examine the wealth of plant life to be found both free in the plankton and tangled over the rocks of the shores. The laboratory work, however, must take second place to the actual observations made on the shore, and excursions, such as this one to Cable Bay on the west coast of Anglesey, are an important part of the course. Cable Bay is particularly suitable for the observation of algal zonation, that is, the distribution of seaweeds on the shore in relation to the effects of tide, wind, and wave action. The technical upper limit of a shore is the extreme high water mark of a spring tide. Above this mark is the splash zone, populated by lichens and small periwinkles. The width of the splash zone depends on the degree of exposure. Once below the splash zone, collecting begins, and the students can check their identification of specimens with the opinion of the instructor. Seaweeds are found clothing all but the most exposed of our shores, and apart from providing food for a variety of small browsing animals, they act as a protective blanket against desiccation and wave action for a multitude of small plankton-feeding organisms that live attached to the fronds. By careful collection of specimens together with records of their location on the shore, the students build up a composite picture of intertidal growth from the lowest levels of the shore, the province of the kelps, Laminaria digitata, and its related species, the Laminaria saccharina, up to the splash zone, and including the numerous intertidal pools. The field of marine botany is itself very wide and varied, and yet it is only a fragment of the story of marine biology. It is to marine zoology that we now turn. The university town of Bangor lies 2 miles along the Menai Strait from Menai Bridge. During the Easter vacation, the Department of Zoology, in cooperation with the Marine Science Laboratories, holds an annual field course in marine zoology. This course was started 30 years ago by Professor F.W. Rogers Bramble, and as a result, a great deal of information has been obtained about the fauna of the district. Once again, the emphasis is on shore observation and the collection of specimens for later laboratory work. One of the places visited during the course is Porth Yscadden on the Llane Peninsula. This particular shore is an exposed rocky shelf facing Carnarvon Bay. Bleak and isolated, it's a popular place for bird watching. The edge of the shelf is exposed only at very low tides and is covered with kelp fronds. Working on this slippery ledge can be a tricky operation unless a sharp eye is kept on the occasional unexpected wave. A visit to this headland often proves most rewarding in affording a glimpse of some of the larger inhabitants of the offshore waters, the dolphins. These aquatic mammals are fairly common on the south and west coasts of the British Isles, these areas being on the northern edge of the animal's natural range. They are elegantly streamlined for rapid motion through the sea and can surely be considered among the most beautiful of animals to watch as they leap and plunge in graceful curves. The dolphin feeds mainly on fish, such as mackerel, herring and pilchards, and also squid. Average specimens are about 6 feet in length and therefore a little too large for the hand net, no matter how great your enthusiasm. The dolphin's rapid passage through the water carries them quickly past and on down the coast towards Bardsey Island. The observation of what appears to be two stragglers close inshore raises a shout, but only proves that dolphins aren't the only mammals in the sea. Instruction in the collecting of material offshore, by boat, is another popular part of the course. Each morning, weather permitting, a small party of instructors and students assemble at Menai Bridge Pier to go aboard the small research vessel Nautilus. The whole day is spent at sea, so packed lunches and warm clothes are the order of the day, together with at least one girl who knows how to brew a good cup of tea. The Nautilus is some 40 years old and only of limited use for research work. This is one of the last trips she made before being taken out of service, and it's hoped that she will soon be replaced by a properly designed research vessel, without which an oceanographer can do very little. Once underway, the Nautilus heads northeast towards Puffin Island, nosing her way out of the strait past Bangor and Beaumaris. There's little to do at this stage other than sitting back and enjoying the ride, which is exactly what everyone does. In the open water off Dutchman's Bank, the going is often a little rougher. The student interested in seabirds can observe quite a variety as the boat draws near to Puffin Island, which is itself a bird sanctuary and populated with razorbills, gulls, puffins and cormorants. To reach Red Wharf Bay, the Nautilus passes between Puffin Island and Penmon Point on the mainland, through the narrow, deep channel guarded by the Truindee lighthouse. A morning sea mist envelops the boat as she enters the bay, and after some discussion, the instructors decide to proceed slowly and at the same time to make a plankton haul. A sound knowledge of the millions of microscopic plants and animals that are to be found drifting freely in the sea is of great practical importance to the professional marine worker. Using a special fine mesh conical net, samples of this plankton can be filtered from a large volume of seawater. In order to filter as much water as possible during the time the net is overboard, it is essential that the towing speed should be very slow, something like 1.5 knots. Quite a large sample can usually be obtained by towing for about 10 minutes. During the tow, most of the filtered plankton passes to the end of the net and settles into the jar. Any specimens adhering to the fabric of the net are carefully washed to the end before the jar is detached. Most marine animals pass some phase of their life history in the plankton, and examination of the haul later under the microscope will usually reveal representatives of all the major phyla. With the lifting of the mist and a freshening of the breeze, the sea roughens, and the skipper decides to go about and pass back through the Penmon sun. On reaching the east side of Puffin Island, the party sets about the next assignment, which is to catch some of the animals to be found on the sea bed. A dredge is used for this operation. Echo soundings are taken off Dutchman's Bank, and the dredge is put overboard. The dredge is pulled slowly over the seabed for about 15 minutes. A considerable amount of heavy material is picked up by a dredge, so it's an advantage to have the assistance of a winch when it comes to the work of hauling in. Once the material is inboard and washed, it is quickly hand sorted and examined for sponges, sea urchins, and the several types of starfish and crab to be found here. By late afternoon, a good selection of specimens has accumulated, and the Nautilus turns for home. By the time the Nautilus arrives back at Menai Bridge, it's low tide, and the evening shore collecting party has assembled at Kai Koch on the opposite shore of the strait. The Nautilus passes them close inshore as she turns to approach the pier. At the end of a long day at sea, the group are understandably tired, but surprisingly enough, most of them still have enough energy to make the most of the remaining daylight by joining the shore party at Kai Koch, once that precious tin bath of specimens is safely on its way to the lab. There are many interesting finds to be made at Kai Koch. The best place for searching is along the extreme low water mark of a spring tide. This explains the quiet concentration of the bending figures at the water's edge. This type of shore, with many weed-covered rocks and copious mud, is an ideal habitat for many kinds of worm, including the nematine or bootlace species. The fragile brittle star is easily identified by its small, disc-shaped body and slender arms. The animal can break off these arms very easily for escape purposes, a mechanism that acts so readily that it's difficult to obtain a truly intact specimen. The larger starfish can also do this. The surfaces of the rocks themselves repay careful attention, for apart from barnacles and limpets, it's here that the several fleshy, colourful sponges grow. Sponges are plant-like in appearance, but are in fact animals, feeding and breathing by drawing a current of water through their flask-like bodies. When the tide retreats, many small pools are left on shore, and one would expect to find shore fishes in these. However, the butterfish, or gunnel, recognized by his spotted, elongated body, prefers to hide under rocks and stones among the wet, slimy weed. Another animal favoring this habitat is the large green common shore crab. Further careful search among the weed will usually reveal the edible crab. The long-spined sea scorpion is another shore-dwelling fish. And when disturbed, it can puff itself up, raising the gill covers, possibly preventing its being swallowed by enemies. It feeds on the prawns and shrimps in the pools. On the other side of the bridge, on the Anglesey shore, there's another good location for beach work, access to which is by a path leading down to a plantation of fir trees, out across a stone causeway, and onto a rocky peninsula known as Church Island. This island takes its name from the tiny 6th century church of Llantysilio. At low tide, the numerous smaller rocky outcrops and the gullies between them can be reached from the main island. Here, again, a variety of habitats are available for examination, ranging from weed and rock to shell gravel and mud. This 9-foot bootlace worm is an impressive find. Casts on the surface of the mud indicate the presence of the lugworm Aranicola, which lives in a U-shaped burrow, the feeding and excreting ends of which are clearly visible. The rocks have their usual encrusting fauna of sponges, sea mats and mollusks, but there are also numerous small mud-covered porcelain crabs with their enormous broad claws. The hazards of collecting are relatively few, but it is important to keep a wary eye on the tides, particularly where rapidly filling gullies can soon cut one off from the mainland. When the tide begins to rise, a warning is given and the party goes into retreat. Now that the field observations and collections have been made, the next task is to identify and examine one's own collection in the lab, and also to have a look at some of the creatures that others have obtained. The rare finds and the larger specimens, like this sunstar that these students are examining, are set out in a separate room. At the laboratory bench, there's plenty of skilled assistance available when it comes to deciding on an academic question of identification. Also, most animals have parasites, and these too must be found and named. No vacation course would be complete without a series of lectures, and over the 10 days, the instructors managed to cover a wide range of topics. Primarily, it is important that the students should have a good knowledge of exactly which animals they'll find on each type of shore. The ecology of various habitats is therefore systematically covered. More general subjects include the discussion of modern fishing techniques and the importance of the plankton, while for the ornithological student, a basic introduction to the identification of seabirds is provided. Lectures are also given to cover the practical work in the laboratory, which includes carrying out the artificial fertilization of sea urchin eggs and the observation of their subsequent development. The library is well stocked with reference books, which the students are encouraged to use when watching animals in the aquarium. Let us now have a look at a few of the animals seen during the course. The worms are a very successful group of shore animals. These ragworms are free-living polychaetes and are found on most shores. The body is segmented, as in all annelids, but each segment bears two paddle-like outgrowths known as parapodia, which are used for swimming and burrowing. As well as providing a means of movement by rhythmical action, each parapodium is well supplied with blood vessels and used as a respiratory organ. The mouth is unarmed, but the pharynx can be everted and bears a pair of powerful jaws so that a large specimen can give a nasty bite. Being an active hunter, the head has many sense organs. The echinoderms are interesting to the zoologist because they represent nature's one successful attempt to produce a complex animal built like a wheel. The brittle stars are distinguished from the larger starfish by the small central disc being clearly marked off from the long, flexible arms with their rows of prominent spines. Brittle stars can swim by gently waving these arms. They're extremely fragile when handled, but lost limbs can be quickly replaced. The sea urchins are built on the same wheel-like echinoderm plan. But in their case, the thick spokes of the wheel have curled upwards and joined together to form a ball, the surface of which is covered by a thin skin bearing the numerous moving spines and translucent tube feet which are characteristic of these animals. The urchin's mouth is on the underside and possesses 5 large teeth worked by a mechanism known from Greek times as Aristotle's lantern. Muscular operation of this apparatus raises and lowers the jaws which are used for scraping off encrusting growths, over which the urchin moves by means of the powerfully adhesive tube feet. The hermit crab's idea of home is an empty snail shell, and he's become suitably modified to fit. This species, Eupagurus, lives in association with the cloak anemone, Adamsia palliata. The cloak envelops the shell, and the anemone's tentacles, which are on the underside of the crab, are trailed over the seabed as the hermit moves, thus picking up a rich supply of food. The masked crab, Choristes cassivellaunus, is more independent and spends most of his time buried in the clean sand near the extreme low water mark. Unlike most crabs, he doesn't even walk sideways. The 2 prominent antennae fit together to form a tube leading into the crab's gill chambers and down which a current of clean water can be drawn. The variety of colours in the skin of this specimen of Cottus pubalis form an effective camouflage against enemies. Closer examination shows that he's well alert and keeping an eye open for a prawn or 2 which he can catch by darting forward. He's a shore-dwelling fish able to cling closely to rocks in crevices to avoid being dislodged by waves. The lesser weaver fish, Trachinus vipera, is a sand dweller and is often discovered accidentally by barefooted shrimpers who step on one hidden in the sand and are injected by the black poisonous spine on the weaver's back. The rays are flattened for life on the seabed by an enormous enlargement of the paired fins. Because the mouth is buried in the sand, the breathing current of water is taken in by the small holes behind each eye and passed out through the gill slits on the underside. The mollusks are an extremely successful group of animals. This snail, the cowrie, is the only British representative of a conspicuous group of tropical mollusks. The shell remains glossy because it can be covered by the soft tissues of the animal. Not all mollusks have shells. These colourful sea slugs are soft and jelly-like. Many of them have feathery plumes or gills, and they're known as nudibranchs. They resemble land slugs only in their lack of a shell, for they are only distantly related and far more attractive. Great care is needed to find these delicate animals. They come inshore in the early summer to spawn, and the life cycle is completed in 1 year. The adults feed on sponges, barnacles, bryozoans, and sea squirts. Some species feed on coelenterates and are able to make use of the stinging cells for their own protection. Although it's interesting to note that all sea slugs appear to be avoided by other animals despite their lack of protection. The spring is the time for spawning for many animals, and search beneath rocks will reveal such finds as these yellow flask-shaped egg capsules of the dog whelk, and at extreme low tide, the lumpsucker, one of the most remarkable shore-dwelling fish. To the untrained eye, the seashore often appears bleak and apparently hostile to life. But careful research and observation by marine scientists and naturalists has shown that in the course of evolution, the many different populations that inhabit the shore have become highly specialized to deal with the changing conditions they encounter. Far from being a hostile environment, we can see that the shore is one of the richest in animals and plants. In comparison with the bulk of the land masses and the surrounding oceans, this narrow region between the tides holds a diversity of form and color quite out of proportion with its size.